All right, I'll try it, and if I get it wrong, just shout at me and I'll do it again.
Okay. Welcome. You are entering a strange realm. A realm of what ifs. What if movies, television shows, and video games were better, worse, bizarrer, or downright different? What might they look like? Find out on today's episode of CineCasters.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the CineCasters. I am Nate Draper, and I am joined by my very good friend, Andrew DeYoung.
Yo, what's up? It's the Janglez.
It's DeJangles. I got it wrong. It's DeJangles.
I very rarely go by my full name on the internet.
That's true, actually. Yeah. Wow. I've probably just been saying it wrong this whole time.
Oh, that's fine.
Anyway, today we are doing Scott Pilgrim versus the World. The famous Edgar Wright movie from, I don't know if it's, I guess it's famous, from 2010.
I think it's pretty famous.
Yeah,
2010.
I think, 2010 with Michael Cera, Anna Kendrick,
Everybody's
Brie Larson,
in this movie.
Brandon
Brie
Routh,
Larson.
famous
Chris
Canadians.
Evans.
Chris Evans, that's right. Chris Evans is in it. This is before he was Captain America.
Did you say Aubrey Plaza?
Oh no, I didn't say Aubrey Plaza.
Aubrey Plaza.
She's in
Anna
it too.
Kendrick.
That's right. Anna Kendrick, yeah.
Yeah.
Quite
so
a collection.
Oh, Mae Whitman. We can't forget Mae
actors.
Whitman.
Mae Whitman, yes, thank you. So a lot of people. Takes place in like modern day Toronto, based off of the graphic novel of the same name, which I would highly recommend, actually.
Okay, good. I was going to say, because
read it.
I haven't read it. I haven't read any of it, because I was going to be like, I hope people who like Scott Pilgrim don't get mad at me, because I definitely haven't read it, and I pitched some stuff that's way different from this movie.
Yeah, I did too. I read it. Around the time the movie came out.
Okay.
I can't remember what I saw if I saw the movie first or if I read the graphic novel first. The graphic novel, it's a series. It's like 7 books, so there's a lot more detail to it, and it's excellent. It's a really, really excellent series. But I do think the movie did a good job of sort of condensing like the main points of it into a movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get into that. So yeah, to start off, what are your thoughts on Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
This is like my millionth time seeing this movie, because I really like this movie. And I have to say, I still really like this movie. Like it's got all the style and substance, and it definitely like messes with the medium. Like I love the way we get these titles, like, and then later on, a few minutes later, or, they went there, whatever. Like, so we get all these like titles, just like it's in the graphic novel. I love the way that there are like points and lives and hearts and a pee meter at one point where it's like while he's peeing. Like just these pop-up graphics that are very like video game, which is from the graphic novel. Like that's all in the graphic novel as well. And people burst into coins. Like it feels like this almost heightened reality. Which I really like. I also love the sort of the jump cuts. Like at one point in time, Envy shows up, and it's her poster, and then it pans back, and she like steps out of her poster almost. Like it's really well done. And then she like talks to Scott, and she's like, "Your hair's gotten really shaggy." Like so, we see a shot of Scott's reaction to seeing Envy, and then it jumps to Envy, and she goes, "Your hair's really shaggy," and it jumps immediately back to Scott, and he's wearing a hat. And he's just like, "Oh, really? I hadn't noticed." Like, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of jump cuts are awesome. Or like where Scott will be preoccupied in thought, and then all of a sudden it'll pan out, and he's in a totally different place because he didn't realize when he got there. Like those kinds of cuts. Like the storytelling is fast paced in this movie, and it's awesome. And I like the story. This idea of like it's a classic story kind of love. However, this time around watching it, and it had been a while since I'd seen it, but this time around watching it, I did notice some serious problems with this movie. And I mean, not problems technically, but problems that I had with the story.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the things that I appreciated about it, I had a lot of things that similar points. I like the humor. I like the way that the way the visual transitions. I'll try that again. The way the visual transitions are conducted they're really interesting, and they really move the story along in a fun way and an engaging way, and they're humorous.
Yeah.
Like there's a sequence towards the beginning where basically he's talking to Knives, and then he's in their house practicing bass, and and you have that moment of like, wait, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And then the band leader's like, yeah, Scott, you only played one note for that entire song, and then they're walking to the party.
Exactly.
And all of these things happen as if they're connected by one thought. So it's as if like the conversation is continuing from one scene. It's not over. It's like we're literally continuing the conversation as we're now in an entirely different location. So I like that. So yeah, some
but
stylistic
it's not
things.
just a new location. It's like it's almost like a scene cut mid sentence.
Exactly.
But the conversation continues, but the scene has changed. It's very cool.
Exactly. So things like that I really appreciated. And so with that there was a lot of humor. I sometimes find I actually am a fan of Michael Cera. I know some people find him annoying, but I think he's really good in this. One thing that's interesting though is I actually would not have, reading the graphic novel, I would not have actually cast him, although I do think he was a good choice.
I think he was okay.
I think he was a good choice, but I think the character in the graphic novel is actually, I think I imagine him being a bit different, but anyway.
Me too. I imagine watching this movie, even having only seen the movie, not having read the graphic novel, I imagine Scott differently.
Yeah, he's in the graphic novel. I imagine him. He's just more oblivious. That's where a lot of the humor is. So because Michael Cera is sort of at that time he was kind of more of the awkward male lead.
Like hipster indie lead,
Yeah, kind of like jumping off of where he was from Arrested Development. Just like really socially awkward and out of place character.
Because he was in Juno and then Arrested Development and then Scott Pilgrim and Superbad. Like they were all that's
right, Superbad as well. Yeah. But the character of Scott, I mean, he was kind of awkward, but the jokes were more that he was just not with it. So a lot of the humor, from my recollection of reading the book, was just like he was just oblivious as to like what was obvious. So that's just sort of my interpretation of it. The comedic timing, again, humor. I also really liked, one thing that I picked up watching it this time was they got the right balance of shitty punk music, but it was not annoying to listen to as an audience. So I'm thinking of like the opening song. Like the whole idea is like they're kind of like a crappy punk band.
But it's the good kind of crappy, not the bad kind of punk.
Exactly. Because that's one thing that's a tricky balance to hit. Because oftentimes what happens is they try to make this joke or they try to show like, oh, these guys suck. But they actually they subject the audience to listening to something that is actually painful to listen to. Whereas in this, it's you get the idea like, oh, these guys actually suck, but I don't feel like I'm being punished listening to it.
Yeah. It's just that sort of like kind of messy punk aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not as polished as like any of whenever they do musical stylings or battles in the show, they're like you can see that Sex Bob-omb and Scott are raw, they're unfinished, versus like when the Clash of Demon Head plays, they're much more polished and pop, upbeat. I mean dark pop, but like you know what I mean. Versus and in the Katsuyanagi twins, like it's much more polished versus their like punk aesthetic. So it works. Yeah, exactly. Another thing too, I'm not sure if this is true, but I had the impression that Envy Adams was based off of, or very much inspired by, Emily Haines from Metric. I wouldn't know. I'm not familiar with Metric. The reason I say that is because Metric actually did write the song that Clash of Demon Head sings. Yeah, and she actually sings it. Yeah, she actually sings it. That's not Brie Larson singing.
No, so okay, yeah. So it's Brie Larson basically like lip syncing, like Emily Haynes and Metric doing this Clash and Demon Head song. But I thought just from like a Canadian music in a movie that's trying to like infuse Canadian pop culture into it.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I'm also a fan of Metric.
I have
anyway,
no idea.
so
I'm not. I kind of liked the idea of Envy Adams being her own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really,
and she
really
probably
interesting.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But all that's to say, I like Metric, and I like that they made an appearance in this movie.
Excellent. Yeah, I do like that. It's also like very rooted in Toronto. Like even Scott is somehow surprised that they shoot films in Toronto. Like okay, you and I obviously know that because we work in the film industry to some extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, they shoot films in Toronto and in Hamilton and all over the place. Kitchener, Waterloo, like it's all over the place, man. Canada's big on that.
Yeah, the GTA. GTA is a hotspot for making movies.
Yeah.
And TV shows.
It's just usually they're not set in Toronto.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joke, which is another thing that I appreciated about it.
Yeah.
I think those were kind of the things I appreciated about it.
Yeah.
Let's get into the things that we sort of thought didn't work. You'd mentioned that you found some things problematic.
The things that I found problematic, and they're probably addressed in the novel, but my biggest problems were sort of more story and character things. Okay. And my problem is that at the end of the day, Scott is fighting another dude for a girl.
Right.
A girl who, by the way, doesn't really explicitly say she wants to be with Scott ever.
Yeah.
In the whole of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? She's just like, oh, sorry, Scott. Like, he just has a way of getting inside my head. And he's like, oh, really? That sucks. And she's like, no, literally. And she's a microchip on the back of her head. Right? And I'm like, oh, okay. So, but it's still, I mean, that's a dick move. But it's also like, how much of that is real? Because Scott is supposed to be in this heightened reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I always took it like the fights were happening, but they were, and we're seeing like a sort of aesthetically super souped up anime version of it, like arcade anime version of it. Like nobody's bursting into coins or anything like that. But that everything that was happening in the show was actually happening. So like, I don't actually know what that means. You know what I mean? That it was just supposed to be like this worm, or that he could like get inside her head. But at the end of the day, it's really just like Scott fights 7 possessive exes over a girl.
Pretty much, yeah. I can't remember if it's dealt with more in the book, but go on.
And that was kind of problematic for me because Ramona never steps in and sort of goes like, no, I'm choosing Scott. Like, first of all, she never straight up says she wants to be with Scott. And she also never says, like, she never tells the exes to fuck off. Like, I get the idea behind the story is that they're both dealing with their baggage. Like, Scott has knives and envy, and Ramona has her 7 evil exes. But, you know, it to me, it's like they're dealing with each other's baggage. But Scott, if you were in a real position, and it's just less problematic, and your ex came up and was like, "Oh, this is your new boyfriend, huh? I'm gonna fight him." You'd be like, "No, that's first of all not cool. Second of all, like nobody needs to fight." Now I get that the point is the fighting, and I'm fine with that. It makes for a good story. But I just don't understand like why does Ramona never say explicitly she wants to be with Scott, and the fact that she only steps in with Roxy. That's the only fight, and I get the feeling it was done because it was supposed to be like, oh, Roxy's the girl of the exes and Ramona's a girl, and so they'll fight, and then we can sort of have this excuse to show Ramona looking badass. But really, Ramona, outside of that Roxy fight, isn't actually that badass. People say she's badass, but to me, she just seems aloof and mysterious. She doesn't do anything to sort of prove her badassery. Mm-hmm. She just sort of has this mysterious league of evil exes, who, by the way, like, what's the purpose of the evil exes? Why do they all want to be back with Ramona? What is their purpose in the story? Like, Gideon's like, oh, I had to put them all together. It took me like 2 hours on Facebook. 2 hours. And I'm like, great, but why? Was it all so that you could get back with her? Was that the purpose of the X's? Like, I don't understand. It's a great movie, but I am having trouble understanding some people's motivations. Scott just wants to be with Ramona, which is fine. But
Yeah,
what is Ramona's motivation? What is...
So that's interesting. Yeah, because I had a similar thing occur to me where it was essentially the same question. And what I feel like, I don't think the movie is, there's sort of, it doesn't really go that deep.
Yeah.
Which is, it's which I don't think it's meant to. It's kind of meant to be kind of a fun, goofy movie. But I do feel like there was an opportunity to kind of explore this idea of our relationship to reality, because there is this idea that one of the questions that I think is sort of baked into the premise is how much of this is like actually like they exist in some kind of video game world, or how much of this is just Scott's perception of it. And I've always sort of leaned towards the latter, where this was just the way in which Scott perceives his experience. So
through pop culture, through video games, through music, through comics.
Exactly.
That's the way he views the world, because that's what raised him.
Exactly. But it's also like, to him, it's a like, this is like a victory. Like he sees it in like, oh yes, I'm leveling up, I'm improving.
Yeah.
And so I think there was an opportunity to really kind of explore the implications of that without it actually becoming a like, a psychologized like, oh no, this is really what's going on. I think it could still be part of the
funny
story
and goofy,
without it being directly alluded to it.
Yeah.
But I do think that one of the things that is interesting is that a lot of it does seem to be sort of coming from the way in which the character perceives their experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the way I sort of read it too. Like I did that in my pitch where I was like, we're seeing all this, but it's not really what's happening. It's just sort of Scott's perception of it. And I didn't even like say it out loud. Like there's no point where it's like, this is what Scott sees and that's the thing. No, it's still supposed to be funny and goofy that way, like an anime come to life. But I just wanted to explore more things like that. So for instance, I thought the movie was trying to be like, at the end, Scott decides, or the power of love that Scott gets in the form of the sword. Then he fights Gideon, and then it breaks. Like it's not good enough. So then he winds up losing his life, but he gets an extra life from somewhere and comes back and fights Gideon again. But this time he does it for himself, and he uses the power of self-respect. And I was like, okay, but I don't understand what do we mean by Scott's self-respect? What was the lesson that Scott learned at the end of this?
Right.
I just don't know. Like, what was the lesson Scott learned? That he needed to look after himself, or like, and at no point at the end does Ramona go like, no, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. It's all Scott's journey about what he wants. I would say that
was another problem too. Yeah.
I would say that actually Knives is a more fleshed out character than Ramona is.
I think so too. Yeah.
Which Ramona's our lead, which is so frustrating. Like, I don't want to say it this way because I do think that the medium is the message, and so like how this movie is delivered to audiences in its heightened reality or in its video game world, whatever it is, that is part of the message. But I think what winds up happening is this movie starts to become a little bit too much sensation and not enough substance at some level.
I agree.
And that sucks because, like I said, I don't want to detract. The medium is the message. This is supposed to be almost like a comic book or a graphic novel with video game references come to life. And it does that so well. But at some point, I'm like, okay, but what was the point? Well, whose motivations were what? Why is Scott doing this? And why does he change his mind at the end? Why does, what does he learn? What was gained and given up and sacrificed in terms of, Joseph Campbell kind of terminology?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I essentially feel the same way, because I think a response that someone would have is like, well, it's not meant to be. It's kind of meant to be just a fun movie. And it's like, okay, fine. Yeah,
sure, yeah.
You can have that. But still, I think there is actually an opportunity for there to still be something that is a little bit more thoughtful while still being goofy and fun.
Goofy and fun, exactly. I think the same, and I think I've managed to do that with my pitch. Although I did change a lot, so I will also say. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I feel like I managed to do it without changing too much. But yeah, we'll get there.
As we found out in the past, that some of our best pitches are often the ones that we don't change too much. Just a little thing that causes implications across the whole plot.
Yeah, exactly.
Is sometimes the best way to do it. What I will say, and I really like this, so I think it's worth talking about, is the references to video game music, particularly The Legend of Zelda, which is hugely important to a lot of people, including myself. They actually went out of their way to talk to Nintendo and got permission to use those themes. So they use Zelda's Lullaby, and they use like the da-na-na-na and like a bunch of other a bunch of other themes from The Legend of Zelda, which I think was hugely important. Because they're so evocative. Like when I hear those, I know exactly what kind of tone or feeling or mood you're going for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I remember when I read it, I would have been about like 18 or 19 when I read it.
Yeah.
So it really connected. It'd be interesting for me to reread it now and see because a lot of the themes that we've picked up on this time watching it, I'm curious. I don't know if I would have picked up on those things when I read it for the first time. So I can't actually comment from memory whether they actually exist in the original source material. So yeah, because I think someone might just say like, oh well, the graphic novel is better. You should just turn that turn it into a series.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah, I think so. From what I recall, in terms of the things that we brought up, I don't know if it really goes into those things as much, but I honestly can't remember.
We probably would get more motivation from Ramona. We would get more motivation from the League of X's, like simply just because of the form, right? You wind up wanting to answer those questions, and you can do that with a longer form graphic novel.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think that it probably is. I just can't remember what those are. So when I did my pitch, I tried to just stick to what the movie was, and then just sort of reimagine that independent of what I recall from the graphic novel. Someone may listen to this and hear my pitch and go, "Oh, you just stole that from the graphic novel." And I just can't remember. Fine.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say like go back and read or pull out different things that we're reading into it now that it's been 10 or 11 years since both of us have seen it. I saw it in 2011, not when it first came out, but I can tell you exactly where I saw it, and I can tell you that I loved it when I first saw it. Really did. Great movie. But I can also tell you that I definitely didn't get the same things that I'm reading out of it now. And I think part of that is just how much more critical I am. That isn't to say that I didn't enjoy this movie watching it this time. I really enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. I think there's some great gags. Particularly my favorite is Aubrey Plaza's character, Julie, and the fact that she can just like make her mouth go black when it's being censored. So we get the like that kind of sound, but her mouth also goes black. And Scott literally like, how are you doing that? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's so funny. It's such a good bit. And I did watch the table reading of this back earlier last year when people were like stuck at home, and they did a full table reading with the whole cast. And Aubrey Plaza actually in getting ready for that part, she had a bunch of like she had a pencil and had like a black piece of paper glued on it so that it would like she could cover her mouth when she got to those parts. Oh, because it was awesome. Just they were just on Skype or whatever, just or Zoom or whatever, talking to each other, and they did the whole table read, and that she had the like so she could do the black over her mouth, which was awesome. I really appreciated that extra little bit of effort on Aubrey Plaza's part, because this movie is so. I honestly think that part of what makes this movie so cool is how fleshed out and real all of the background characters feel. Mm-hmm. Stacy is sort of your stereotypical older sister to Scott, and she's funny and it's hilarious. Mm-hmm. And like Julie calls Scott out on his shit. Kim and all of Sex Bomb are really kind of minor characters, but they're in it the whole time and they're really, really cool. They feel real. Young Neil as well. Knives. Even there's this one guy named Komu who they're just like, Komu knows everyone, and he's like, Komu, what do you know about Ramona Flowers? Like, just these background characters. Like, this world feels full, and it's not just the 7Xs who scream personality with their costumes and the way they talk and the jokes they make, but you know what I mean? Like, this whole movie just screams personality, and it's well done. It makes for awesome visuals, and it makes it so you can tell the story fast pace without losing personality or character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I would say that's an accurate take on the movie. Yeah, I agree. It's a fun movie. It's a really fun movie.
So even though the reason I want to say this is even though we're getting down on it, I do think that the way this movie plays with form, like the actual form of the medium of movie making, I think that is absolutely fantastic. This is exactly what I would want if an anime came to life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah. Should we get into pitches?
I think we should.
How are you feeling about your pitch?
I'm feeling good. Mine's not too long. I'm happy to go first.
Mine's not super long either, so I am also happy to go first. Mine's about 2.5 pages.
Okay, mine's maybe like a page.
Okay, why don't you go first then?
Okay. So essentially the movie's more or less the same up to the point when Clash of Demon Head shows up. And Scott takes away Todd's vegan powers and defeats him in battle. I got that's just
so
funny.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah. I had to keep that. But basically at this point, Scott goes, Scott basically goes like, wait, why am I fighting all of your ex-boyfriends? This is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? And actually, then what happens is Envy and Ramona start fighting each other, and Ramona reveals that she's got to battle his exes as well.
Yeah.
And so she battles Envy, and she defeats Envy. And so and then it cuts to a scene of them walking away, and he's like, "Oh, this is kind of weird. Like both of us are fighting each other's exes. This seems kind of unnecessary." And then she goes, "What do you mean this seems unnecessary? You asked me to do that. Like this was actually your idea."
Oh shit.
And he goes, "Really?" Like he doesn't remember saying that ever.
Yeah.
But apparently one of the things that Ramona calls him to task, and then she's like, "Yeah, as I've been battling your exes, they all told me that you asked them all to like fight your previous exes."
Okay.
And they all decided not to do it. So basically she's starting to go like, she is now starting to question Scott at this point in the movie. So remember, I've skipped ahead a little bit. And so by this point in the movie, this is the point in the movie where essentially whatever they've established is starting to being called into question.
Yeah.
And she basically calls him out and says like, so wait, are you basically like, I'm basically bringing the metaphor to the forefront, and basically Ramona says, you just don't seem to be wanting to deal with your own baggage, and so you seem to like go into relationships as a way to deal with that.
Yeah.
But Scott doesn't seem to be ready to acknowledge that. Anyway, at around the same time, Gideon shows up in Toronto, and while Ramona and Scott are in the midst of this sort of disagreement, she breaks it off, and Scott hears that she's gone back to Gideon. So now Scott's not slow. Like up to this point in the movie, he's been trying to get with Ramona. It hasn't worked, and now he's sad because it's like the thing that he wanted. He's like, it didn't happen, and now he's sad. So he goes. It's more or less the same thing that happens where it's like people are like, oh yeah, you should go get her. He gets that speech from his sister, so he's like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So he's gonna go, and he goes to battle Gideon, and it's the same thing where like his band has signed up with Gideon, so he's on his own. He shows up, but even when he gets there, the people in his band are a bit more sincere and going like, "Oh, wait, Scott, why are you here? Like, this is kind of weird for you to be here." But he basically says like, "No, I'm gonna fight Gideon, and I'm basically gonna, I'm gonna make things right." And he fights, he's defeated, and he uses his life again. And in both cases, so then he basically comes back to life. He goes in again, he tries to fight him again, he gains the power of self-respect, And he also discovers that Gideon's using a control device on Ramona. And he goes, oh, I have to defeat Gideon. But this time he's got the power of self-respect. He fights Gideon again, and he still loses. This time, it goes to a game over screen.
Ooh.
And it goes end game or continue. And it goes up. It sort of hovers over end game for a second, and then it goes up and it hits continue. And then it goes back. And it goes back to the point when Ramona breaks up with him. And so it plays through him going through the heartbreak again, him talking to his sister and Wallace, and then being like, yeah, go get her. And he's like, okay, maybe I did something wrong. So he goes back and he tries to fight Gideon again. He gets through the door. He tries again, gets the power of self-respect again. It still loses. Game over. Continue. And then he tries it again, and it keeps going over and over again. He tries little things over and over again, and he keeps getting it wrong. Finally, hits continue, goes back. We see it again one more time, and he gets to the door for Gideon, and he decides, no, maybe this is wrong. Like maybe I should just give up. So he doesn't fight Gideon.
Yeah.
So we flash forward a little bit. The band Sex Bomb has gone on and has actually had some success. Wallace moves in with his boyfriend, and now Scott's alone in his apartment. And people are starting to worry about Scott and being like, is Scott okay? So he meets with his sister, and he's like, I tried to do what you told me to do. You told me to go and get her back, and I thought I tried it and it failed, and I thought I could make it happen, and I just feel like I'm a failure. And she's like, wait, what did you say I told you to do? He's like, you said that I should go win her back. She's like, I never told you that. I told you that she's not good for you. Yeah. I told you that she's manipulating you. She's not a healthy. She's like Scott, think about it. She's not a healthy person for you to be with.
Yeah.
And basically his sister points out the only reason you wanted to be with her was because she was something that you had to work. You needed to feel like you were winning something. You couldn't just accept. You're not someone who can just accept what's given to you. You have to feel like you're actually that in order that if you've earned it, that you're able to have it. I never told you to go and win her back. That was I think it's good that it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And Ramona probably does not have a mind control device. You probably exactly. So you get the sense that Scott sort of this whole idea of without saying it that he's sort of constructed this reality.
I like the idea. Sorry. I'll wait till the end and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Well, I'm almost there. Anyway, so she's basically like, I think you should just move on, and so he does. And he basically then it cuts to later, and it's him, and he sees Ramona. And she's broken up with Gideon, and she's back to delivering Amazon packages, and they just cross paths. And so then it's them carrying on a conversation, and then it's them walking off together, and then it's to be continued, ?
Ooh, yeah.
End of movie. Yeah,
that's essentially the idea. It. Sorry, what I really like is the idea of, and this is just a thought, where because you're playing with this reality thing, so as Scott keeps doing this game over screen and then continue and then continue and then continue. I even and then you were like, well, later on we can have a scene where it's Scott Wallace has moved out and Scott's in his room. If you could set it up so all those continues that Scott tried were actually just him going over the scenarios in his head, what if I tried this, or what if I had tried this, or what if I had tried this, but none of it had actually happened. It was all just him going over and over and over in his head. None of that had actually happened.
Exactly. That's sort of what it's one of those things where I feel to do it properly, there'd be enough to imply that, but you wouldn't there'd never be the scene where he's sitting with a psychiatrist and the psychiatrist is going, Scott, I think this whole you're just imagining, and then at the end of the movie it goes to normal. I like the idea of keeping it within this game universe, but people in that point out to him Scott, you imagine it happening this way, but that's not actually what happened. You've convinced yourself that you told yourself what you wanted to hear.
Yeah. No, I like that.
But this isn't what happened. Yeah, exactly. So
that's good.
That's essentially it.
Yeah. I didn't play with reality nearly as much. I kept it in the video game universe, but Mine is sort of focusing on like, so I wanted to introduce Scott the same way.
Okay.
It's basically in mine, everything stays the same unless I mention that it's different.
Okay.
So the movie starts out the same way. Scott and Knives are dating, and we get an introduction to all the characters. And then we have Ramona enter the whole thing the same way, and Scott meets her, and everyone says she's a total badass who's like aloof and standoffish and a total badass. We also hear about Scott's old relationship with Envy, who's now from the Clash at Demon Head and is super famous. And Scott's like, yeah, they got super famous, and then, started to get a bit of success, and then she broke up with me. We also see Knives calls Scott like she's like you're the nicest dude like I've ever met. You're such a nice dude, and it's so awesome that we're dating. So so Scott plays bass, but he also does karate in his free time.
Okay.
That's just a thing he also does. So the fights make a little bit more sense. So as soon as he starts thinking about Ramona all the time, Scott dumps Knives immediately. So he never really cheats on her, but he's basically like, all I can think about is Ramona. So he's like, okay, I'm going to break up with Knives. And he immediately makes his intentions with Ramona apparent. And she seems cool with it because she's like, yeah, you seem to be like a really nice guy compared to any of the other guys that I dated. We're then introduced to the same way through the email, the League of Exes, but Scott wasn't paying attention. Scott fights Matthew Patel and then actually learns about the Exes. Scott beats Matthew, and then he bursts into coins.
Okay.
Same thing. So they go to the movie set, and Scott fights Lucas Lee, but this time he outsmarts him instead of actually fighting him because he's like, I can't win. And Ramona is impressed by this. She's like, oh, wow, like you're not just good at fighting, like not just have karate, but you also... you can outsmart some dudes. So while out together, Scott and Ramona run into Knives. And Ramona can see like how broken up she is. And Scott's like frustrated with the exes. He's like, I fought like 2 of the exes now. And they're all like fighting over Ramona. What's up with that? And Ramona claims like it's not like 7's not even a big deal. Like I'm just trying to move on. Don't even worry about it. And then Envy shows up and talks with Scott, but like separate from Ramona. Yeah. And she's like, oh, we're playing a show, and I think you should come. And also, I think Ramona is a badass. Like, I'm a little jealous. So Sex Bomb opens for the Clash at Demon Head, and we see Todd. That's Envy's now boyfriend and Ramona's ex. And Todd and Scott fight, and the vegan thing can happen because that is actually really funny. After Todd explodes into coins, Envy is mad that Scott turned her boyfriend into coins. And he's like, whatever, you kicked my heart in the ass, so I guess we're even. And Envy's like, whoa, I broke up with you, but I broke up with you because you were being distant and brooding because we were getting famous. And I'm sorry that I didn't have a lot of time for you, but like you didn't want to be with me. Like it was clear this made you unhappy and you were distant. And I'm sorry that it broke your heart, but I was heartbroken. Like we were in this relationship that wasn't working. I was heartbroken. And so I broke up with you, and all of that fueled me, and we wrote like 4 or 5 songs because I was so heartbroken about our breakup, and that's what launched us.
I like that. That's cool.
And so Scott's like, well, you're a bitch. Like, there's no way that's true. Like, you broke my heart. And he brushes her off. So Envy seems to be super like angry, and she's like, well, fine. And she like is like, Ramona, I will fight you then. Because like, and Ramona's like, no, I'm too cool. And she blows Envy off. So then Roxy shows up after the party, and Scott is tired and doesn't want to fight Roxy, but Roxy basically like calls him out, and he's like forced to fight her. He's like, I don't want to fight a girl, and Ramona doesn't step in because she's like, I don't fight. And then he basically like punches Roxy, and she explodes into coins, and he's like, this isn't fun. Like he basically is like, I don't want to deal with your exes. Like, why is this happening? This is stupid bullshit. And she's like, well, you think I like running into Knives, who's still obsessed with you, and Envy, who like is still clearly brokenhearted over whatever happened between the you. Like, this isn't fun. And so they leave separately from the after party. So Scott and Sex Bomb do the battle of the bands, the last round of the Katyanagi with the Katyanagi twins, and they enter. They win, but instead in my version it would be more like a musical battle. So it would be like two songs that are in the same key, one punk, one like techno or like EDM. But when you play them together, they would still work.
Oh,
so it would
cool.
actually be like a musical number in the middle of the. It's crazy because I mentioned this, but My Little Pony does shit like this so well.
Yeah, I guess.
Like where there's like musical numbers that are 2 different musical numbers, but they like. You can go in and out of one. It's not hard to do. It's really cool. Anyway.
I'm surprised they didn't, because they had Nigel Godrich, who's like,
Yeah. I mean,
legendary. I don't know. He's a legendary producer.
I feel like you could have written 2 songs and then sort of like have them fade into each other as they're battling, literally for like amp to amp loudness.
You're friends with Radiohead. You could have like suckered them into writing a song for this.
So they win the Battle of the Band against the Katyanagi twins, and Gideon is there, and Sex Bob-omb Gideon shows up, and he's like, how about you guys sign a contract with me? And we turns out he's the last of the evil exes, and Scott is basically like, no, we're not gonna like sign with you because you're shit. And the band is like, yeah, we're gonna sign with you. Like, sorry, Scott, but your ego is getting in the way. We're gonna sign. And he's like, well, you guess you're gonna need a new bassist. And young Neil is like, well, I can do it. I know all the parts. Like, you even said I know all the parts. So they sign without Scott. And so Scott basically is shit out of luck, and he's on his own. But he goes to the show because he gets a call from Gideon. Goes to the show, and he's gonna get Ramona back. And he calls out his band where he's there. And he's like, yo, you're a bunch of fucking sellouts. And the band is like, whoa, like, okay, the real reason that we kicked you out is because you're actually an asshole. You only care about your own shit. You, like, leave band during rehearsal. You, like, invite your girlfriends and shit. Like, Neil shows up every time. He's not even he wasn't even in the fucking band. And now he knows all the parts. And now he's in the band. We sound tight, man. We've never sound better because Neil actually gives a shit. And also, by the way, Stacy, Scott's older sister, and Julie, through the entire movie, even in the movie we already get, are already basically call Scott an asshole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like over and over again. So Scott fights with Gideon and wins, but Gideon was genuinely upset. He was like, I thought Ramona actually wanted to be with me, but it turns out she didn't. She just wanted to see if Scott was serious about her and could follow through with defeating all of her exes. And so Scott's like, wait a second, you just made me prove my love to you by fighting off all of your exes? That's fucked. And Gideon is like, wait, what do you mean evil exes? Is that what she told you? We just formed a league as a way to try and stop other people from dating Ramona because she's a fucking asshole. Because what makes Ramona so cool, what everyone thinks she's so cool and badass, is actually that she's just aloof. She's unable to commit to someone. She keeps her distance from them, flirts, and then when things get too serious, she dumps them. And so the League of Exes is just people who are broken up about it and like, wait, you too? And that's why they formed the league. So they've been fighting Scott to try and be like, don't do this. And Scott's like, what the fuck? This is super not cool. Like, why would you do that? Like, this is really weird, Ramona. And then Envy shows up and basically says like, Scott, you do the same thing. And he's like, no, you're a bitch. So no, I'm not going to. And she's like, I hate you. And also because his self-image is of him as this nice guy, because that's what everyone calls him except for his sister and Julie. And now the band, and also Knives, and so like, but then Knives shows up and she's like, no, I feel the same way. Like, you were with me because it was convenient, but when Ramona showed up, you were obsessed with her and you wanted to be with her, and you dropped me like a rock. And you did the same thing with Envy, which is what she just said. And Scott realizes that his actions have actually just been as bad as Ramona, and that Julie and his sister Stacy have been saying this the whole time, and now the band is saying it too. And then all of a sudden, Scott's shadow appears. Nega Scott appears, and it looks like they're gonna fight because Scott has to contend with like his image of himself. Mm-hmm. But instead, they actually just sit down and talk. Like, it looks like it's like a total subversion. They sit down and talk, and Scott, in conversation with himself, realizes that he has in fact actually been a total asshole to everyone, and he starts apologizing to people. So he starts with his band and Kim specifically, and young Neil for treating him poorly, and then Julie and his sister Stacy, and then Wallace for being a bad roommate, and then Envy, and then finally Knives. And then when Scott tries to apologize to Ramona, she's like, wow, maybe you're not as cool as I thought. Like, even though you beat up all my exes, like, this seems really kind of touchy-feely and not cool. And she effectively breaks up with him. Like, I don't want to be with you anymore. But this means now Scott is the 8th member of the League of Exes. And he summons all the other exes and tries to explain. He basically is like, now I'm a member of the league. And he summons them all and says, we got to, like, the problem isn't that we got to stop people from dating Ramona. The problem is we got to make sure Ramona sees what I just learned. Like, we can't treat people this way. And so they try to teach Ramona the same lesson by talking to her about how they felt used and abused and like she just, dumped them. But unlike Scott, Ramona doesn't seem able to hear or doesn't want to hear. And so Scott asks the League for help. And with the power of self-introspection, right, power of introspection, Scott pulls the sword out of his heart And with this new power, the League defeats Ramona and she bursts into coins. So this, I think, would actually be shown as a bonus round. Like when they all fight, it would be like bonus round or like secret boss. You know what I mean? Like something fun like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott then leaves the venue while talking with the exes, who are actually all really cool people and have their own things going on. They just formed the League out of like co-misery. And he apologizes to Knives one more time before he starts walking home with Wallace, only to find Envy waiting for him. And while she's still upset about Todd being turned into coins, except that actually hasn't happened because Todd's there. So he didn't, he turned into coins, but that's part of the whole thing where this is like a heightened reality.
Yeah.
So he's still there because he's walking home with Scott. So she's like, you turned my boyfriend into coins, and he'd be there anyway. But she's like, I wonder if you would like to try being friends again. Not because I want to get back together, but because I genuinely like you as a person, and I think we can both move on from this heartbreak. And like she's genuinely willing to see him as a person if he has changed. And that's where we would end.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. To me, it was like the entire time I was like, Scott is actually an asshole. And
no,
is
he
Ramona. And so I was like, I think the only way to make this work actually is to be like, no, Scott has to learn a lesson here. And It's not self-respect. It's that he's an asshole. He treats people like poop.
Yeah. I agree. I completely agree.
And I think he has to end the movie like single, trying to figure out his shit.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way too. Yeah, it's interesting. I think we both picked up on similar themes, and actually there was a lot of I thought it was funny that Ramona also fought Envy in your version as well.
Well, Ramona didn't fight Envy because she's too cool to fight, even though she's making Scott do all the fighting.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
There do seem to be certain ideas that, just in terms of how the world was built, were almost sort of natural extensions that could have been explored. And yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting that the movie that we got wasn't a bad movie, but there was this. I always felt that too, because there were two things that I sort of, in thinking about it more, thought. One of them was like, yeah, Scott is kind of an asshole, and also like, why? Like Ramona doesn't seem like someone who'd actually be like a healthy person to be
in a relationship with it. Yeah.
Like neither
you
of them
went
like,
further and you were like, oh, this isn't a healthy relationship for you. I turned her into the real villain.
Right. Yeah.
But the way that I did that isn't like Ramona's not a bad person per se. I mean, she's an asshole, but she's not evil. Like it's just she lacks the introspection to see how she treats people is unhealthy, even for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to get at with that. But like, and the fact that in the movie that I saw, or at least I read it, like everyone's like, Ramona's such a badass. Oh, she's so super cool. But she doesn't do anything except for that one fight with Roxy. But I think in my reading, it was just supposed to be like, oh, that's girl fight because girls.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can't remember how that one goes in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any last minute thoughts about Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
No. The movie that exists is still pretty good. Yeah. I think we pointed out some flaws, but it's still a fun movie.
Oh, it's a great movie. Yeah, like I said,
yeah.
And what I wanted mine to be was this heightened reality where like things can happen where people burst into coins, but it's not like they actually burst into coins.
Like forever, yeah.
Yeah, like the idea is that's just part of like this video game heightened reality thing where Scott's like defeating them and they're bursting into coins and it looks really cool, by the way. Like just visually it looks really cool. But then like at the end all the exes are back. Like none of them died. Yeah. Scott just defeated them, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I never took it as like they're like gone forever. It's just they just that's the way of visualizing that they've been defeated in battle.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a cool way to do it, like just burst into coins. Especially at the one point, I think it's at the first show when he fights Matthew Patel and he picks it up and he's like, what? It's only like $1.25? That's not even enough for bus fare. And Ramona's like, I'll lend you the other 25 cents. Like it's just, that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, exactly.
This movie is super well written. It's very sharp. It messes with the medium, and the medium is the message. Like, thank you, Marshall McLuhan. But like, that's what I think is so fabulous about this movie. Is that I think it does suffer a little bit in the plot department from being a very simple plot. Like it's basically Mario saves Princess Peach from Bowser, with the 7 like exes being the Koopa children or whatever. And but which is what it is. But I do think that that's a simple story that could have dealt with more depth. But the way that the story is told through this like jump cut, heightened reality, video game, comic book overtone is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Nate Draper, or on Letterboxd at Draper Nate, or on my website, www.nathanieldraper.com. That's Nathanael.
Yeah. You can find my band Robot Philosopher anywhere you listen to awesome music. You can also catch more episodes of this podcast and the CineCasters Classic right here. And you can check out This Is a Thing, or The Long and the Short of It, or whatever else we got going on the CineMasters Ultimate Timeline. Thanks for chilling with us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.